there, fantasy owners. Welcome to Lift the Cup Fantasy, or LTC Fantasy as some call it. And we're rolling along with our team reviews. Today we're going to look at the Florida Panthers and take a look at who led them in stats for goaltenders, defensemen, forwards. Who was their biggest fantasy surprise? Who was their biggest fantasy disappointment? And who on their roster was relevant fantasy-wise on a weekly basis, not just a streamer basis? And we'll continue to have these come out every few days because no better way to enjoy the fantasy offseason than watch the playoffs. Some good series going on. And talk a little bit of fantasy hockey. Don't forget to subscribe. That way you can catch your favorite team's review. Maybe you're looking for your rivals review. Maybe you want to catch all 32. Or just take a look at a team that gets overlooked fantasy-wise. So we'll jump right into it. Goaltenders. Who led the Florida Panthers there? It was Sergei Bobrovsky. He had a bounce-back season here. He led them in games played at 54. Wins with 39. He had a goals against average of 2.67 and a save percentage of .913. So he had a really good season after struggling for a few in Florida there. He was not quite as Vezina finalist form, but you're starting to see that. Obviously, strong roster in front of him, so his numbers should improve. But there's a little bit of scare last year that Knight was going to take away the net a little bit from Bobrovsky, but he took the reins and ran with it this year. Jumping into defensemen, who led him in goals was Eric Ekblad at 15. Also led him in assists at 42 and points at 57. And that's with missing 21 games. He only played 61 games this season, so he had a really strong season. And still with missing 21 games, led in all the scoring categories, if you call it that. Plus minus was Gustav Forsling, plus 41. He was a beast in the plus minus department there. Radko Gudas. You couldn't ask for more hits from a person. 355 hits. Man, he threw that big body around this year. Mackenzie Weegar, he led him in blocks at 156. Also led him in shots on goal at 203. The only one to break 200 shots on the back end there. Ekblad probably would have been there if he would have been healthy all year. Obviously, Ekblad had another great season. Too bad it got shortened with injury there. Weegar also had a good season. He plays on that first pairing there, and he did put up decent point totals, just kind of overshadowed by Weegar. And, overall is pretty strong roster in Florida, obviously, there. So we'll jump up to forwards. This is where it gets interesting. A lot of good forwards there in Florida, obviously. Goals was Alexander Barkov with 39. Huberdeau had led him in assists at 85 and points at 115. Barkov led him in plus minus at plus 36. He's a stud there for sure. Hits was Sam Bennett at 119. Anton Lundell, the young kid, led him in blocks at 56. And shots on goal was Sam Bennett at 241. Now, with forwards overall, Barkov had a good season. 88 points in only 67 games played, so he did miss 15 games there. Huberdeau had a career year, 115 points. And this is not even looking at their other forwards like Duclair, Verhaeghe, Giroux, Reinhardt. They were very, very strong up front this year. Lundell had a good season. Marchment at times. So we'll jump into who was the biggest fantasy disappointment. For me, it had to be Patrick Hornqvist. He had such a good season there a year ago. Decent season anyways. And he only put up 32 points in... He had 32 points in 44 games last year, and he only registered 28 points in 65 games this year. And with the amount of firepower in Florida, sure, he might have got dropped down a line, but you're expecting to see more than that, especially with the amount of goals they scored this year. Biggest fantasy surprise has to be Jonathan Huberdeau. Yes, you know he is good. There's no denying that he is good, but when you jump up to 115 points, and his career best before this was 92 points, he eclipsed it by 23 points. That's a huge jump, and obviously a surprise fantasy-wise for you. Who is fantasy relevant on the roster on a weekly basis? There's a number of them. You could easily just say the roster, but to pare it down a bit, you can look at Barkov. He's obviously really good. Huberdeau. Reinhardt had a really stellar season. Giroux was really good. Ekblad was awesome when healthy. Uyghur was really good. And Bobrovsky had a really solid season. So there's a number of players that are relevant on this roster on a weekly basis. They also had some decent streaming options in Duclair, Verhaeghe, Sam Bennett, Anton Lundell. Marchment at times was really good. On the back end, Gustav Forsling had some really nice streaks in there. So did Brandon Montour playing on that second power play, especially the last 20 games or so. Knight would be decent as a floater goalie if you do use that strategy, just with the amount of wins Florida pulls off, or if you have an extra goalie that you just kind of rotate in and out based on spot starts. Knight's another possibility there for you. I do hope you did enjoy the episode. If you did, please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, and remember that notification bell. We'll be out in a few days with another one there, fantasy owners.